want to thank you all for being here. Again, it hasn't been, we haven't been together since like this, since 2020 in January, so it's been a long time. And things really aren't exactly where we'd like them to be right now with the pandemic. But I think we're beginning to learn that this is kind of our new normal situation, and we need to live our lives and continue safely. So when you leave, use hand sanitizer that you all have in your cars and trucks. I know I've got mine right in the console. And be safe. I want to thank Patty and the staff here at Southside Steakhouse. If we can give them a nice round of applause. They're out there. One of the rules, I believe, is here that if you continue to be hungry, please go back. No problem if you get up and go get stuff. And the restrooms are off to your left, and I think there's one around to your left, my right. Would like to thank our staff, Lori Pinkowski, who is sitting down right here. She can't wave because her hands are full. We also have, Lori's getting everybody signed up for these things. I told Cam I wouldn't move, and now I'm moving. Then over here we have Tyler Richardson, and we have Crispin White, and we have Olivia over here, Olivia Lyons, all part of the staff of CEDRR, and I'd like to have you give them a nice round of applause. And also keep the applause going for Omnia, who is the sponsor of our event here today. Thank you, Omnia. And our legislators who are here today. If you would just raise your hand. Brian Collmore, thank you for being here. For us. Tom Burdick, where are you? Raise your hand. Tom Burdick's over here. Next round of applause for Tom. We also have Bill Canfield. Where's Bill? Raise your hand. He's over here from Fairhaven. We have Larry Kupeli. Where's Larry? Right here.
Stand up, Larry!
And we also have Peter Fagan up at the table up here. We also have Jim Harrison. Where is Jim? Raise your hand. Jim, he's back here. We also have Mary Howard, who is right in front of me. With a really nice red thing. I like that. Don't set that down.
No, I
know. Okay. I won't wear it, but I'm going to pick it up. Also, Art Peterson is right here. All right, right in front. And also Butch Shaw, who's up at the table up here. The delegation chair. All right, Bob Helm didn't come in, right?
No.
Oh. I'm sorry.
Sally
Aki. Wait.
Aki.
Like me twice. My apologies.
Yes.
Sally Aki right here. All right. Thanks for being here. Okay, who else did I miss?
That's it.
I don't know the rules. I just don't know the rules. Okay. All right.
You're out of practice one.
There are cards at your table if you want to write down a question, fine, but we're a pretty intimate group here, so if you want to ask questions later, don't worry about the card, just ask questions. The nice thing about our legislative delegation is that they are there for you, and they will answer your questions. And they work hours and hours and hours for us that we don't see. They're not just up there voting and then turning around and coming home. They go to committee meetings, there are study committees, there's a lot of reading. I love going up to the legislature and just looking in the, what do you call the place where you guys sit all the time?
Committee room?
The chamber, thank you very much. Should I know that?
How about the committee room? Committee rooms.
Okay. Sitting in the chamber, you go up to where they're sitting, and it's piles and piles and piles of stuff to read. It's amazing. And Doug Gage is smiling over here. He says, not me anymore. No, not me. All right. So, thank you for all your work on our behalf. I was going to go over the order of events, but the order of events, I'm going to give it to them, and then we're done. And you can ask questions afterwards. There are also petitions flying around here because it is petitions time of year, and there are petitions up here, including one for the governor, if you'd like to come up and sign petitions later, if you've not already done that. And we have quite a few potential candidates in the room, which is nice to see people running on our behalf. People that have served, and it's a pretty amazing list. We have a list came out the other day of folks that are no longer serving, and it's a pretty amazing list. Which means we need people up there to work for us. So thank you if you're running and that you're talking to people about the things that you think you can do for us. For those that are leaving, and I'm not going to announce their names right now because I hope they change their minds, but there were a couple in the room who are leaving, and we thought, given all the work that they do up there, what would they appreciate most as a departing gift? So once they have officially decided that they're not running, because they have until Thursday to get their petitions back out there. But if they decide not to run, we thought, well, what would they want? Well, they're going to have a lot of time on their hands. And we ordered these puzzles. And we can't sell them all. And we're told that it's the hardest puzzle in the world to put together. In fact, someone tried to return his puzzle to us. We said, no, you flip it over because the directions are on the back. There are letters on the back. We said, oh, okay. But so once they decide that they're not running, they will have a departing gift from us in one of those puzzles that we can't sell. And they also, the nice thing about the puzzle is they're not open, they're a re-gifting opportunity, so please, feel free, I don't want it, but feel free to re-gift at any point. I'm not the one that you're here to listen to. We appreciate the fact that you came to the breakfast here from the Chamber and Economic Development of the Rutland region, hosted by Omnia. Going to turn this over to Butch Shaw. This is a point where we kind of go through what happened. You were there months working hard for us. What happened? And how will that affect us? And what's ahead? And there's no pressure. It's just the facts. And so I'm going to turn it over to Butch Shaw, who many of you may not know. Butch Shaw is the delegation chair. He's the person that herds all the cats up there, brings everybody together every Wednesday morning. Is that when you get together? Every Wednesday morning. 8 a.m. They get together as a delegation to talk about how to move Rutland County forward. So, Butch, ladies and gentlemen, Butch Shaw.
Thank you, Lyle, and we'll buzz through this fairly quickly because unlike some of you have to go back to work. So we'll get going on this. But first of all, I want to thank Lyle for the great introduction of everybody and of the delegation. We're the most feared delegation in Montpelier because we meet. So, and I appreciate the members doing that. And as Lyle said, our last get-together here was January of 20. And the legislature checked out of the State House March 13th of 2020 for a week for cleaning. The House went back in January of 22. Boy, how time flies, 22. The Senate went in back in on the end of February of 22. And in the meantime, what we all did as a legislature, we appropriated and spent $750 million to make the State House COVID unfriendly, to try to keep people in the building and keep them healthy, including a massive amount of money in IT.
It wasn't that much, but it wasn't 750 million?
Oh yeah, it was.
No. We did not put $750 million into the State House.
Appropriations.
Oh, I'm not going to argue with you, Peter. I'll just beat the crap out of you on the golf course.
With your golf club.
Yeah. $750,000 in IT projects, which now you all can just look up our website and click into the committee meetings and watch us meet as a committee. You can click into all the floor sessions and watch us on the floor as we're doing our business. And if you would like to come and testify, you can now do that remotely. We allow that, and it's working out very well. Somebody from Rutland drives up to Montpelier for 10 minutes of testimony, turns around and drives back. It's a 3-hour trip. So we appreciate doing this, and it got us back into the building. However, we found early on that legislating remotely, as we did for a year plus, we make mistakes. We made mistakes in legislation. We didn't get everything right. So we spent a considerable amount of time this last session re-looking at legislation that we passed to make sure we had it right. And there were a few bills that we brought back out, made some corrections, and then put them back into law. So we passed some unprecedented spending this year, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Peter going to talk about the budget. Brian's going to go first and talk about the action in the Senate and other spots in the building. Then I'll come back and give you a really brief overview of S11, which is our economic development bill that we passed. I think one of the last bills we passed during the session. We passed the big bill. Hang on here. The big bill, or what we call the budget, or the big bill, was $8.3 billion that we passed. It's an unprecedented amount. The transportation bill was $866 million. That's $200 million over the previous year. And the capital bill, which is usually around $70 million, passed out at about $113 million. The capital bill is the bill that builds state buildings and maintains state property. So we spent a lot of money, and we're going to hear a little bit about that this morning. So without further ado, Senator Collmore.
Thank you, Butch. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
This is great. I think Tom Leopold told me the last time I was in this room speaking was the PEG TV annual meeting, which was probably 3 or 4 years ago now. So it is great to be back with you all. As Butch mentioned, we passed the largest state budget in history, $8.3 billion. Much of it was funded by one-time federal money. And as we all know, especially those of us who run businesses, when so much funding is available, there is a temptation to create new programs and new positions, many of which are laudable and well-intentioned, but which also will need to find new funding sources once that one-time money is gone. So, were we able to resist that temptation? That's the question. And I don't think we can answer that today. I think it'll be a few years from now when all that money is indeed gone. But I did ask the Legislative Joint Fiscal Office to research how many new state positions were created in legislation that we passed in 2022. So the preliminary answer is 131 total new positions were created just in the legislation this past year. This covers 70 new permanent positions plus limited service positions. In addition, 97 existing limited service positions were converted to permanent positions. So in total, if you do the math, there are 228 positions which will have to be considered in upcoming budgets. Do we resist the temptation or not? I don't know. Again, that'll be for future assemblies to determine. And Peter will do a much deeper dive into the budget. But a couple of highlights.
I don't want their eyes to roll back in their head. No, I will not.
$40 million was allocated to a refundable child tax credit, which will affect about 33,000 children in the state. There are considerable amounts to address our nursing shortage, both for nurse educators and scholarships for nursing programs. There's $15 million in loans to CTE in terms of workforce development and fixing buildings up so that we have career technical education students. Over $15 million allocated for a COVID paid leave grant program, which will reimburse employers for the cost of paid leave provided to employees. We expanded the income threshold for Vermont's Social Security exemption by $5,000. But one thing we did not do was to honor our veterans by exempting fully their retirement pensions. A mere $10,000 was the final threshold set for our vets, which to me is simply not acceptable. We need to go back and address that again next year, and we need to fully exempt them, in my view. Governor Scott has now vetoed a total of 32 bills. That's a record by any governor. He surpassed Howard Dean this past session. Howard held the record for a while, but Phil Scott has it now at 32. Two of his vetoes were sustained in the House by one single vote. The Clean Heat Standard and the Burlington Charter regarding just cause evictions did not become law because of those sustained vetoes. Another charter from the Brattleboro folks, which would have allowed 16-year-olds to vote, also was vetoed and sustained in the Senate. I am sure, knowing how things work, both of those will be back again to deal with in the next biennium. And the expansion of the bottle bill simply ran out of time and died, and that will be taken up, I'm sure, again next year as well. So the last thing I want to mention is how different the General Assembly will look next year, and how different Vermont's statewide and federal representatives will look. In total, 2 of the 3 members of Congress, and in Montpelier, 4 of the 6 executive officers are leaving their post this year. So the only current statewide office holders who have announced for re-election are Governor Phil Scott and the auditor. All the others will be gone. There will be a new U.S. Senator, a new congressman or congresswoman, or congressperson, I guess we say now, I'm still learning the rules, a new lieutenant governor, a secretary of state, a new treasurer, and a new attorney general. According to Vermont Digger, Vermont has not seen this many open officer positions, you ready? Since Hey Jude by the Beatles was the #1 song. And in case you don't remember what year that was, the year was 1968. In the General Assembly, there are at least 11 senators. Fully more than a third of that body will not be back next year. Senate Secretary John Bloomer could not remember a time when this has happened, but he knows it is at least a quarter century with that amount of turnover in the Senate chamber. 3 of those senators are committee chairs. In the House, over 40 members have announced they won't be back. 9 of the 15 are committee chairs, and 2 of them hold very, very important positions. One in the Ways and Means Committee, which decides taxes, and correspondingly in the Senate, it's the Finance Committee that determines how many taxes we're going to pay and what those will be. And the other one is the chair of the Appropriations Committee. Peter knows her well, and she will not be back as well. So there will be a lot of new faces both in Montpelier next year and on our state and federal delegation. And the voters, as is always true, will decide in November what those folks will be like. So that's my little piece this morning. I thank you very much. I do want to salute, if I could just very quickly, I know this is kind of hokey, but if you own a business in Rutland County or manage it, I'd like you to just stand up for a second. Thank you. On behalf of everybody, thank you. Thank you for taking risk in opening your business and for employing people and keeping the economy running. That's what it's all about, in my view.
I'm here
And-
one more year because of that vote. Thank you.
Thank you.
Longer than that, Judy.
Am I going to go to Peter next or Butch?
Go to Peter.
Peter Fagan.
Thank you and good morning. So Lyle is passing out something that will preclude me from needing to speak to how we appropriated over $1 billion in ARPA funds over the past couple of years. Please feel free to take a look at that. If you have any questions, I'm listed in the phone book. Please reach out to me. Or if you have any questions today, certainly I'll answer them. I'm just going to go through a few things. This will only take but a couple minutes. So, federal money coming into the state, coronavirus relief funds, and if everyone remembers, that was prior to the ARPA funding. We received over $1.1 billion fully appropriated and working its way through the expenditure concept or process. On the ARPA side, we have appropriated almost $1.1 billion. So that's $2.2 billion that came into the state that we have appropriated to stabilize the workforce and to improve things. The improved things are listed on there. You'll see the major columns that there are 5 of them. We also received over $100 million in ARPA capital projects. Think water, think broadband, things like that. And the IIJA, the Infrastructure and Jobs Act, will send us at least another $100 million to be able to continue on with the concept of providing broadband in the state of Vermont. A lot of money, a heck of a lot of money. So it's been appropriated, it's out the door. I'm just going to go through 2 years ago, we established targets as to how we would appropriate the ARPA funds. Those targets were the economy, and you'll see the on those sheets, the highlighted major areas. The first is G300, the economy, workforce, and community. Our target, $250 million. We appropriated $425 million into that because one thing as business owners will understand, and probably all of us here understand, when you inject money into economy, it just doesn't get used once. It gets used over and over and over. And every time it gets sent someplace else, someone else is taxed. Those funds come to the state, and we had record amount of tax receipts for general fund expenditure. Hence our ability to spend more in some of these areas than we had in the past. So a lot of money went into the economy and the workforce. Housing, we had wanted to put $250 million in there, $250 million. We put $284 million in. Broadband, we wanted to put $250, we put $248 million. IIJA will give us at least $100 million to plus that up. And the concept has been that it's going to be about $500 million to do broadband in the state of Vermont. We've given it one heck of a jump start. And then with the extra IIJ money coming in, that'll be $350 out of the $500. Everyone figures that the communication union districts will be able to bond for the rest of it. And we may just get there. The IT, which is a subcategory on there, we've put $116 million out of roughly almost $1 billion worth of need in the state. Everyone remembers the UI debacle that we had here a couple of years ago. Literally, you had legislators helping individuals file for UI. And that system itself is over 40 years old. The system that the Agency of Human Services uses, called Access, is 50 years old. We got a lot of work we need to do in those systems. Climate action, we wanted to put $250 in. We put $261 million into it. The clean water, we wanted to put $225 million in. We put $209 million into it. So a lot of money. And of that money, the reason why we put in more in some places, we put $405 million worth of general fund into it. So a lot of money. A couple of highlights, maybe like 10, just to let you know. We provided a rate increase to the community mental health system, 8%. Typically, we were able to do 2%, maybe 3% if we can really stretch it. The House was able to do 7%. The Senate was able to find a little more money. They always have the luxury of getting the budget obviously after we do. And so they were able to find a little more money, and we were able to put 8% increase into the designated agency community mental health system. Really needed. Substance use disorder, we did a lot of work there, and the only thing I'm going to mention is the recovery centers. Turning Point, which we have here in Rutland, is one of them. We actually increased their base funding. What does that mean? They don't have to fight for it next year. It's in there. They will receive that money next year instead of one-time allocations ongoing. Child care providers, we put additional funding in them. The regional, here you go, Butch, you can explain it. The regional dispatch, which I really had hoped that I would never have to address and say out loud again because I was involved intimately with it about 8 years ago when we took multiple dispatch for fire, police, etc., and consolidated it into 2. It's now getting unconsolidated and sent back out into the state and becoming regionalized again. So there's $11 million. Yeah. There's $11 million sitting in a reserve. 6.5 will go out for organizations that are standing up right now. The other 5.5 will come along as soon as the rest of the regional centers are ready to go. And should there be additional funding needed, I am sure that will be provided. UVM, the Vermont State Colleges. UVM had not had a base increase. Their appropriation was $42 million for 14 years. Had not had a base increase. We allocated them $10 million base increase for the first time in 14 years, up to $52 million. The Vermont State Colleges, they're a lot better off now than they were before. A lot better off. I'm not going to tell you how direly close they were to closing, but you'd be astonished. They got a base increase of $10 million, and we also put almost $15 million in ARPA recovery money into them to provide them a bridge to their future. 5 of that will go into a savings account for next year so that they don't have to work as hard to get additional funding from the legislature next year. Pensions, we did a lot. The one of the big things we did that took $1.6 billion of liability off the state's books is that we pre-funded the employees' OPEB, other post-employment benefits. Think healthcare. And by doing that, we're able to use a discount rate, an assumed rate of return of 7%. That's what we use in the state, although when I was elected it was 9.5. We're a lot smarter at 7. Instead of the 20-year bond rate of roughly 2.2%. We reduced we reduced deficits at the state level. We are going to pay off some bonds early, and that'll save us money. It'll also improve our standing for borrowing. We established an IT modernization fund. Our general fund reserves total roughly $281 million. And I'm going to just slag this, but you've got roughly $105 million in our budget stabilization reserve, roughly 85 or so million in our rainy day savings account, and the human services caseload reserve, roughly 100 million. So, but it totals $281 million. The last thing I'd like to say, because it's really relevant to everyone in the state of Vermont, the community colleges in the state started last year a 802 Opportunity Scholarship. And for children of families with household income less than $50,000, you could go to the community colleges tuition free. All you have to do is pay for books and fees, and that's not much because they don't necessarily use hardback books. We've increased that with funding in this budget to include families with family incomes up to $75,000. So we can really educate our students. Now, how well does CCV do? When Suresh Garamello came in as president of UVM, 4 years ago, they had 3 articulation agreements with CCV. So three of the programs that you took at CCV, they would accept them full credits up at UVM for admission. That's now up to 28. Which means the rigor that is demonstrated at CCV is fully accepted by UVM. CCV is a great resource for our students, a great place to start. And then they can move on and become whatever we need them and they want to be. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Butch Shaw. Thank you. But one more thing.
Sure.
And I will formally announce this is it for me. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Peter, for your service.
Wait, you gotta have a public.
Butch, you're helping me put this together.
And I know you have to agree, I've never known a legislator better than Peter Fagan with the numbers. He studies. So we need to give him a nice round of applause.
That's going to be hard to follow.
You got something really good to follow.
Yeah, I think I may have. Our resident expert on economic and workforce development was unable to be here this morning. Representative Jerome from Brandon. She's out of town at a college graduation. I think she's got one graduating and very happy that that's happening. So, workforce and economic development was a huge piece of the legislative session this year. I have voted on economic development bills in the past that had no money on them. They were all aspirational. They just had, we think we can do this, we think we can do that. This year, the legislature finally put the money where our mouths are and are spending $108 million on workforce and economic development statewide. And with that, I'm going to charge the chamber and the RPCs to keep track of what's going on. And the bill number is S11 and how that plays out after the governor signs it. Because money's going to the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, the Department of Financial Regulation, the Agency of Education, Department of Labor, the Department of Corrections, and others. So when it comes out, it's going to be fragmented. and it's going to go to various organizations that I think you all will need some sort of a place to go to get information when this money starts being distributed. The bill intended to address the negative economic effects of COVID-19 on our economy and our employers and our workers and our families, and this would try to establish an opportunity for Vermont's economy to grow. We're creating and enhancing programs with goals of increasing workforce participation rates, as well as training, retraining workers in nursing and mental health care and the trades. And the bill is heavily funded in those three areas. Very heavily funded in those three areas. We think we know, as those are the most jobs that are open right now, and we need people in those jobs. So the money that's appropriated comes from the general fund, the education fund, but the largest chunk of money comes in ARPA funding, which we heard Peter and Brian both describe is one-time money. So we need to get the best bang for our buck out of these funds. There's money appropriated to come up with an immediate strategy statewide for expanding our labor force. That's important. I don't think we have a central place to go where we know what we really want to do. So we're going to spend money on that. We're going to look at regional workforce expansion areas, especially in areas that are underserved, where we just don't have the people to do the work. And I think that's probably every county. One that excites me a little bit, we have a population of 1,200 to 1,500 at any moment incarcerated in Vermont. Most of these people are going to eventually hit the street. So we're investing money in a pilot program to see if we can develop a program to employ these people when they come out. They'll have a place to go, they'll have a job, and they'll re-enter society, we hope, as productive individuals. So that's a workforce, excuse the pun, but it's a captive workforce that we have right now. Workforce learning and training program for employers. We're looking to set up programs for employers. When you hire somebody that needs training, we'll be able to reimburse you. We're not sure how the program's going to roll out yet. That will be a big deal. I think that would be a really big deal. We'll have scholarships for the trades, career tech ed, construction and rehabilitation learning program, a revolving loan fund to provide money for students to go to these programs. A really big one in the bill, there's about $8.5 million total, is emergency grants to support nurses and nurse educators and mental health people to try to boost our workforce in those areas and get some people in with scholarships, loan forgiveness, and easy repayment for the loans that are not forgiven. So we're doing what we can, and also in other areas of legislation that we've done to make it easier for people, especially nurses, to either stay in the trade and get into the trade or help them progress through the trade so that they will stay here.
Butch, if I might add, this is, in my 14 years here in the legislature, this is the largest effort at working on the healthcare workforce by far and away that I have ever seen. So, you know, this is just a start though. I have been saying, I was really involved in getting this going, that this has got to go on for a decade, but it's got to start somewhere. It actually started with a scholarship program, and that scholarship program is, I made a mistake and didn't put it into statute. It's now in statute, will be with this bill, and that will carry forward. That's just a piece of it. We are going to have to do this over the next decade, but this is a start.
Thank you, Peter, for that. And when we're talking about, when we're talking about the nurses, we can't leave out the mental health professionals. Many of you have probably heard from workers or friends when they call for mental health in Rutland County, can't get anybody, there's nobody available, or if somebody's available, they're backlogged for weeks and months. There's money in this bill to relieve that and do a similar thing to the nurses, is keep people here, get them into the business, and be able to help the citizens of Vermont. For you all, there's 2 sections in this bill for COVID-19 related paid leave grant program. So if you are still using the leave program for COVID-19, and some of you may, some of your employees I'm sure are still being affected by that, and you're paying them, that particular program ran out a couple of years ago. So we're refunding those programs, and there will be a grant program that you will be able to apply for to get some funds to help you if you're paying your employees while they're out with COVID. There's 15.18 million in one piece of the program, and the second piece of the program is 10 million, $25 million to help businesses work through the loss of employees due to COVID. Vermont Arts Council, it's an important piece of Rutland with the Paramount and other things we have going on in Rutland for the creative arts. There's $9 million in there to support the creative arts program. When they were closed down, we know they lost millions of dollars and are struggling today. So we're hoping to boost them up with a $9 million appropriation. The legislature begrudgingly funded the governor's relocating employee program, and it was a tussle. As a matter of fact, the House did not fund that. The Senate did, and it compromised. They're funding about $3.1 million in that program to the governor, and we'll see how it goes. The auditor has said that he does not think that program is worth the money, but we're hoping we can prove him wrong and attract the workers to Vermont. There's the Downtown Village and Tax Center Credit Program for those folks that have those areas, and if you do not have a village center in your town, you should work to get one. And I read an article this morning about a couple over in Tassville that need the downtown center designation to help them reopen a country store. And they don't have that, and it's a long process to get that. They have to change their town plan, they have to change zoning, and they're having some trouble, and they want to invest $50 million. I think that's the number I read this morning, to do a restaurant and a building renovation and all. It might have been 5. I'm a little trouble with numbers, but it might have been 5. So don't quote me on that number, but they want to invest a whole bunch of money. And we're going to, there's actually language in the bill that establishes a study committee. We don't do anything in Montpelier without a study committee. So we're going to look at sports betting in Vermont. The governor's proposed that for the last two or three bienniums, I think, and it just never goes anywhere. And finally, we've come to realize that the states around us are doing this. We may be losing out, so we're going to look at that. And there's other things in the bill that I won't bore you with, and this is where we're going to fall on to Lyle and your group, Ed and your group. Well, you're leaving, so it doesn't really matter. But to keep track of these particular things, and we can help you, whatever you need to do. And the big thing is getting information out to you folks, so when these programs become available to you, you can apply or do whatever is going to be necessary to get in on these and keep your businesses strong and keep moving forward. And with that, thank you for hearing us today. And Lyle, we're ready.
Questions from the floor. Now, hi. Questions from the floor. Tom Leopold from PEG TV. Let's give a nice round of applause for PEG TV.
Tommy
Reporting in the back here. Bringing this to you, not so live, but.
Well, you're live here now. So, I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of PEG TV and all the other access centers around the state of Vermont. We face challenges too, like everybody else. And I want to thank you all for your support. It's really nice to live in a community where you can email your representative or your senator and you get a response. And actually, the members of the Vermont Access Network commended me on the response I got from the Rutland City Delegation and the Rutland County Delegation on the challenges that public access television are facing. So while I have you all in the room, I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for all your support. Appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
And I think our delegation might be the only one that gives us their cell phone numbers, which is pretty interesting, so thank you for that. A question that I have, and regional marketing initiative here, I talk about that every year. We do rely on the remote worker relocation package. People are using that in our region, so we look forward to that continuing. We look forward to opening our Hub Co-works, and we're writing for some grants for that in downtown Rutland here on Merchants Road. It'll be a co-working location, and we hope to have a business incubator built into that through a EDA grant that we're writing for right now. Tyler is working on expanding the airport industrial park by going across the street. If you've been down there, you know what I mean. If you haven't, you don't care. But across the street, there's some land where we could add to the industrial park, but we need to get water across the street. More information than you wanted, but what Tyler's working on right now is a Northern Borders grant to hopefully get the water across the street. So there are lots of things going on right now with grants and funding, money that's available, and we're making or taking advantage of that. One of my questions for folks here, and it's probably a hard question, which is, there's a lot of ARPA money out there right now. What happens next? Because we are spending a lot of money right now. Is it sustainable? And I'm sure someone has looked 2, 3, 4 years down the road to how do we keep this going? And maybe that's a statement more than a question, but has someone looked at that, and what's the end game? Peter?
A little bit, you're right, it may be more a statement than a question, but I can at least speak to some of it. In House Appropriations Committee, and I know Butch mentioned this earlier, how are we going to continue to fund these positions? We won't. You will see positions just go away. At least that's what we said. Because if they don't go away, taxes would need to go up.
That's right.
I've never voted for a budget where taxes went up, and would not vote for a budget where taxes go up. That is my bright red line. And they did once, my very first year on House Appropriations, I did not vote for the budget, and we ended up having to trim the budget mid-year because the budget was not sustainable. So, but to get to your question, the funds will not be able to be spent. It's impossible for us to spend roughly $2 billion over the course of 1 or 2 years. We have until 2026 to actually allocate the funds. They're appropriated, but they need to be allocated to projects by 2026. 2024 and spent by 2026, that's correct. And so we've got some time to be able to get that done. I would anticipate that it will take that long, because let's face it, you put $250 million into broadband work. The broadband work is very specific, and there's only a couple of schools nationwide that train the line workers to be able to get it done. So it is a very long process to get it done and get it done right. Plus, we will be receiving more funds in. The IIJA will come in, and as those funds are drawn down, and we have to match those, some of them up to 20%, some are not match required, but others are up to 20% match. And that's a $1.7 billion allocation to the state of Vermont over 8 years. So as we draw those funds down, I don't know if we're going to draw them evenly or not over those 8 years. You've got 8 years then to spend it. So there's a lot of time there. There will be a lot of money, as there is right now, in the state of Vermont working to get things done that is not just, here's more money for a salary. So what happens at the end of that? I would hope that we have a Vermont that's a little easier to work in, that has more resilience as far as our weather, and be able to bounce back faster. There is money in the budget, ARPA, to be able to buy out properties such that flood all the time, and we all know where they are. That addresses the water and sewer problems that we have here in the state. I don't know if Rutland still has any pipes that were put in by soldiers who then went off to war, the Civil War. but we certainly did within the past 5 years. I don't know if we still have any of those, but we're working on them from what I understand. So a lot of work still needs to be done. That's the best I can do to answer your question.
Great, thank you.
I got one thing on that. So, Peter started talking legislative ease, and.
Sorry. I wonder why.
He mentioned IIJA, we talked about ARPA, American Rescue.
American Recovery Plan Act.
There you go, thank you, American Recovery. I know what it is, I don't know what it means, no. But IIJA, that's our new, that's our new federal funding for infrastructure coming to us over the next 5 years. Yeah, and it's about 1.7 billion. It's heavily loaded towards transportation, about 900 million coming to transportation, the rest going to broadband and other areas of that. And that's a great thing. We had ICE-T before, and then there are always acronyms that the feds use. It has training money in it for the workforce and other things. But there's one problem with that, and Peter just mentioned that. Next year's IIJA appropriation to Vermont, the matching money required for that appropriation is $20 million. So before we even start next year, the transportation fund is in the hole $20 million. And with the reduction in the fuel taxes, we're stressed now. We're the only piece of the state government that's not in the positive piece when it comes to tax receipts. So there are some things we need to do. By year 5 of the IIJA program, we'll need $50 million for matching funding to draw down all the federal funds. So when this ARPA money goes away, IIJA kicks in, and the corona relief funding has gone away, it's going to be a real hard dance to do in Montpelier to come up with all this money without raising taxes. And so, can I say hang on? I'd say watch out.
So I'll just add, I think Lyle put his finger on it, and I asked the question perhaps a little more gently, but you were spot on. Did we resist the temptation? I think I started my address that way. You know, it's a lot different if we put money into new pipes or broadband or things that are tangible versus programs and positions that get created that in 2 or 3 years you're either going to have to say, hey Doug, sorry, it's been nice having you work for us, but you're fired. Or the alternative to that is to raise taxes or fees. And I'll tell you right now, the fees are going to go up. If you're going to register your automobile in the next year or so, take it for 2 years, because I guarantee you at the end of that second year they're going up again. There's just no way around that. So the more we resisted, and I mentioned I think it was 232 new positions, if you figure the average is about $100,000, $120,000 for a state position, that comes up to somewhere over $8 million that we're going to have to find just to keep the people employed that we created positions for this year. So, you know, the governor said it pretty well. I thought it's harder when there's a whole lot of money to spend, because everybody lines up from here to booth 7 with their hand out. It's a lot easier when there's very little money, because people understand they can't get any money if it isn't there. So I hope we resisted it. I'm not sure we did, but time will tell.
See.
Thank you. Questions from the floor? I know you all have jobs to go off to. Any burning questions? Doug Gage.
Yeah, sort of a statement. When I was up in the healthcare committee, I can take that, sure. It was 6 years ago, we took over mental health. All 3 of you have announced that we're putting money into mental health. We got an overview of what mental health is in the state of Vermont. This is pre-COVID, pre-numbers going up for suicides and whatnot. They talked about how the wait times in hospitals for people with mental conditions, forced wait times, the number of counselors was down, the pay was down, the number of slots available for people with mental health issues was dismal. They went on for 45 minutes, and I'm thinking to myself, this is horrible. But what they said next, my jaw hit the floor. They said we are in the top 5 states in the nation for good mental health. And then COVID hit.
Yeah.
And we are in a desperate situation right now. We have people who've been affected by COVID. We have kids who have not been in school with their peers for 2 years now. Things are in really bad shape. So I'd really like them to comment just a little bit more on some of these funds and reiterate kind of what I'm saying about the state of health, mental health in particular.
Nobody's touching the mic.
So, there's not a whole lot else that I can add as far as the state of mental health in the state of Vermont. We do have a couple. We only have 2 mental health hospitals. One is in right near Montpelier, and then the other one really is the Brattleboro Retreat. And the Brattleboro Retreat has been going through very difficult times, such that actually the Agency of Human Services had to assist them with extraordinary relief, and also required them to provide financial information to the state before we would do anything else. It is slowly improving, but slowly improving is the operative concept there. Mental health is we're just now as a society beginning to understand how important it is to the overall health. Pete Fagan would argue that it's probably the first thing you should be looking at in a body is the mental health of the body, and then you work to the physical health of the body. But Doug, I can't really answer any further.
Thank you.
We do a good job at kicking the can down the road. So
I would encourage you every day to thank an educator, because they're out there working with kids every single day. So when you run into your kids or your grandkids or just a teacher you know, thank them for what they're doing day in and day out. They had to pivot and pivot and pivot, and they continue to do that, as does the healthcare system. So thank you to the hospital, thank you to community health, and I know Michael has a question. So Michael Gardner from Community Health.
Thanks. Hey everyone, thanks. I'm the CEO for Community Health, and just took over that position less than a year that I've been in it now. And for those of you who don't know, Community Health and Rutland Mental Health are the 2 big players for providing service. I'm not sure which one is larger, but we're both. We set records last year in the number of mental health visits that we provided. We had probably 20,000 some patients that were actual received services from us. So I hear you say that there was a big increase for Rutland Mental Health. They get paid a different way than Community Health does. Right. And our increase was about 1%. Huh. We're a federally qualified health center, so it's very complicated how the funding flows through. But a big chunk of it does come from Vermont Medicaid. So I'm wondering if you know about any additional funding that was approved for community health centers. We are currently hiring new providers for mental health as fast as we can. We've probably hired an additional 5 providers here in Rutland County. And every time we hire providers, the waiting list doubles. We're still not able to keep up with the demand. It is at the top of our priority list to get additional providers on board. We know it's a problem in the community, so it's not being ignored. From our side, I know I work closely with Dick Corsell at Rutland Mental Health, same. We're aware of it, and we're doing everything we can, and hopefully some of this funding for helping with our workforce and trying to draw people into Vermont to stay in Vermont. It's a big problem looking 5-10 years down the road. Not only nursing, but primary care providers, mental health providers, dental providers. That is at the top of our strategic plan is what are we going to do to retain, recruit our medical staff that provides service. It's looking like it's going in a critical stage of 5 years down the road. We may be in trouble. So just wanted to make that
Sure.
note. Thank you.
So I'm not sure if the 8% is allocated across the Medicaid rate increase. If you give me your card before you leave, I will find out for you, and you'll have an answer before tomorrow, before the end of business tomorrow.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
We're reaching up to 9 o'clock here, so I don't want to keep people. These folks are available, and they will talk to you, they will email you, they'll phone you back. Please ask questions. What I think we have heard today, though, is that a lot of listening did happen in the legislature. A lot of money is flowing in the directions that we are talking about right now. And the nursing shortage and education, whether it's career and tech ed or otherwise, people are listening. Workforce is a critical issue, housing, critical issue, and it all has to be done at the same time. Childcare, roads, it all has to happen at the same time. And so I think you heard a lot of money being distributed in a lot of different places all at the same time. And I want to again thank our legislators for the work that they're doing. Let's give them a nice round of applause again. Thank you. I would be remiss because someone mentioned it, not to give Ed Bob a puzzle, because he's, and is anyone else leaving their position? Happy to give you a puzzle. Now, I know I'm kidding about that, but we do have them on sale at the Chamber of Economic Development of the Rutland region, and they are Peter Huntoon puzzles, and they are beautiful. They are beautiful. We went to Peter and said, would you let us use a print and allow us to make puzzles that we can sell? He said, sure. I said, how much? He said, Lyle, just make the puzzle. So he volunteered that. He did it for the hospital. He did it for the Paramount Theater. What a giving person. So $30 for a puzzle. Stop by the Chamber of Economic Development of the Rutland region, or go see Ed or Peter. And they have puzzles that they may re-gift. Thank you all for being here today. Enjoy your day. We'll do it again.